I'm going to do it again just so everyone knows that we have just started the meeting, and I thank so much Chike and for bringing us Destiny. So thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Everyone, you couldn't read it, but through the chats, everyone was saying such a great thing about you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We are very happy to have you. And again, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Have a great day. I am Almaz Negash. Welcome on behalf of all of us from the African Diaspora Network, our board, the community we serve, our funders, our team, my wonderful team, and the Executive Leadership Council and our champions. I welcome you to the third in series of the African Diaspora Investment Symposium for 2021. We are very, very happy to have you. The symposium is, as many of you or some of you may not know or may know, every year the African Diaspora Network for the last 5 years has been hosting the African Diaspora Investment Symposium, where we bring about between 250 and 350 people throughout the world in Mountain View at the Computer History Museum. But we know now that January 2021 was not going to be possible to have that in-person meeting. So our board early on decided that we should have this on a monthly session for 7 sessions. January, we have some big thing for you. So the end of this is January 2021, where we will celebrate 10 to 13 builders of Africa's future social entrepreneurs and business entrepreneurs. But this morning in itself is very special because we continue to focus on 4 issues, and one is connectivity, finance, healthcare, and education. These are very critical to the development of the continent, and also the communities where we live. But today, we're going to have a discussion on connectivity with some phenomenal people. Before I give this to them, and also I wanted to share with you their bio, but I do see that there isn't that much time. I'll share it probably through our website. You've seen it. But what I wanted to say is that this event is possible thanks to the support of the State Department. I want to shout out to Thomas DeBass and Ashwood for all the support, also financially, not just only as partners, but they also helped us to get this convening going. Just so you know, to put this is the same as what you do, and it's every month, like having a wedding every month. It just doesn't end, it ends up in 7 months. So the planning and everything is very, very time consuming, but also joyful when you have supporters. So I want to thank them. Just also to be honest to myself and to our community, the African Diaspora Investment Symposium started by seed funding we've received from the State Department in 2016. So I'm very grateful for all that support. And this morning, you all know what to do. Just mute your mic so we don't have to hear other noises, but we definitely want to get you engaged via chat. We have so many different things we're going to share with you via chat. One of them being the top of my head, and I will go ahead and keep sharing. Megan, my team, Deborah and Caroline, we're all here. We will continue to share things with you. But the one thing that I'm asking, and I'm pleading actually, for those of you who are new, you can do your survey based on what you have experienced today, but we're sending out a survey that was developed, scientific survey, which we've been waiting to do this for a while, but all things considered, we are very happy to start officially on October 1. But today we're going to start because I want to take advantage of the many people that you're in here. Please, it will not take you more than 7 minutes. I would encourage you to complete that survey. Right now, without further ado, I will encourage all of you to do this, but I would like to introduce my wonderful friend, Eliane. Every time I ask her to do something, she's always there. Thank you, Eliane. Eliane is going to have a fireside chat conversation with Mr. Philip Tigo. Philip, welcome to ADN. I believe you both are here. I'm going to stop. And then I'll have you guys take over. So thank you and welcome everybody.
Thank you, Almaz. Thank you. Thank you. And also, thank you, Destiny, for starting us off. That was so beautiful. Chiki, thank you for bringing Destiny to us. And as we wait for Philip to join, I'd just like to say, what's interesting for me is that Destiny Muhammad also means it is destiny praised. So if we think about Africa and destiny praised and our diaspora praised, where can that take us? And so the title, the initial title that Almaz shared with Philip and I in terms of this fireside chat is the Africa Technology Infrastructure. How can technology transform African economy? So Philip and I have had a preliminary chat, and just to start us off, hey Philip, so I was thinking, okay, how can technology transform African economy? But how can African economy transform technology? So Philip, what are your thoughts on this?
You kind of flipped it on my head, right? So thank you again, Almaz. Eliane does this. We met 10 years ago and she hasn't changed a bit. I think there's an entire concept around being African, and we've had it from the introductory ballad, for example. I mean, this is how we do things. We do things very differently, and I think it's always African to flip things around, and this is just, we're very good at this. And I think I always tell people that when you talk about technology, of course, we've had many phases of technology. This is the fourth one. And in the fourth one, I always tell people the first one, steam was on our backs, was built on our backs. The second one around electricity and mass production was also built on the backs of Africans. And I think my fellow Africans in the diaspora, you are very familiar with this. The third one, which was more ICT, is still built on the backs of Africans through our minerals like coltan. The fourth one, I think this is our revolution. I mean, it's built for us. It's about connectivity, it's about being connected, it's about being open, it's about being, and so those are the fundamentals that I think are very African. So I think we have a lot to say about this new revolution, but I think we have to be deliberate about it. No more being shy about it, because if this is our revolution, then we have to step up. Secondly, I think if you think through the sort of demographics we're seeing around the world, Africa is younger. Our median age is 19.7. Everybody else is getting older. So the 19.7 as a median age basically tells you that we are basically a digital revolution. And a lot of our young people have a lot to say on technology. They're not vanity applications. I'm sure Nivi from Nivi will talk about what they're doing. It's not about sending somebody to the moon. It's very much practical. It's the simple technologies that actually have meaning and improve people's lives. And that's what I think makes us African. It's about Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. And so our technology always speaks to that connectivity and communalness.
So as we navigate this COVID time, one of the things we talk about, there are different ways of looking at this reset. And the one I like the most is this idea of how do we move forward stronger? It's not about how do we build back better, but really, how do we move forward stronger? And in particularly, how can the diaspora be intentional and how it contributes to moving forward stronger in terms of how technology can transform African economy and invest?
I think we spoke about this, I think, in our preliminary chat. It's to the extent that our development, as much as we have been rich in minerals or other issues, our development has always been driven by either bilaterals or other funding sources. And that speaks a lot to ownership. It speaks a lot to direction. It speaks a lot to how this other development is shaped. And so there's now an opportunity. And because this revolution really does not necessarily require that kind of massive investment, and because it's very rapid and keeps on changing, then it means even a diaspora community that we have can invest in startups. It's about exponential companies. I always tell people WhatsApp is run by 55 people, right? So we do not necessarily, and it's in the cloud, it's really not physical, right? So potentially we have that capability. And my sense now is that if we're going to build for it stronger, then we need to start speaking about ownership. And part of ownership is funding from Africans for Africans. So how do we have Africa's money for Africa's development? And this is Africans everywhere, including the diaspora. And so my sense is that we need to think of reinvesting. Brick and mortar, fine, but then let's invest in the fourth industrial revolution. The kind of technology, the kind of companies that we're seeing now are more the most valuable companies, which are basically the technology firms.
So, Philip, you and I, when we met a decade ago, I was intrigued by your involvement in Ushahidi, and now you're advising leadership in Kenya, in the President's office, Vice President's office, and Kenya has been the birthplace of many really innovative technologies. Can you just speak a little about your own journey in this space and how you see Africa moving forward and really contributing in terms as a producer and not a consumer of technology?
I think it speaks to a couple of things, and this is something that we do, I think, at Thunderbird very well. I think it's to understand context, right? It's not trying to, and this is something that I think we talked about, it's not trying to leapfrog. My journey has not been trying to aspire to be something that I'm not, because context is very specific. We cannot be Silicon Valley. We're just not engineered or built like that. So I think there's that realization that we have to be and use what we have to modernize, not necessarily westernize. So I think for me, that has been my proverbial mindset. The second thing I think is, how do you decolonize your mind, right? So that it's not about West is best. It's about also your locality or your location. After all, that's where you are. You have had generations of Africans being born, and we are still here. So we must be doing something right. So how do you build from that and not necessarily do from scratch? Use your adversity. So for many of you know me in the call, I was born in Kibera, right? So to the extent that how do you harness that situational knowledge of being born in Kibera, but then being able to understand that you need certain set of tools to be able to break the barriers so that you can have the same access to opportunity that others have, which means education, I think, is a key asset for this. But now we're talking about lifelong education. So it's just not about it's not about many things. It's about how do you skill the skill and upskill yourself so that you are always on the cutting edge. And that's, I think, something that Kenyans are very good at. We call ourselves, everybody has a side hustle in Kenya, basically. So you still do what you have to do, but then you still have to do other things that you feel can contribute into the developing of the economy. So that basically has been the journey, I think, through all these years. And when we met, remember, we're working on peace. You have to deal with those situations. At that time, we just came out of a very hard post-election situation. So I cannot aspire to do something else until we solve that particular piece. And those are the building blocks, I think, for me of going forward. The other bit I think that I wanted to mention very quickly was that you have to be there has to be a deliberateness. It's not a question of will, and that's the conversation I have with the leaders that I advise. People talk about political will. Will is flaky. You need to be deliberate if you really have to create sustainable and resilient change.
And so this issue of being deliberate, and we all know this is the great reset in terms of COVID, in terms of values, in terms of the next 3-4 years of how we navigate this disruption is going to be critical on our capacity to really change our relationship with each other, change how we look at interconnectedness, and also look at really how can we actually deal with inequalities. And so how do you see COVID and how has COVID dislocated and amplified inequalities?
Well, it's a question that we kind of deal with every day. I think, first of all, is that, of course, context, as I say, is very important. So each country, I think for me, it's sort of brought into the surface, sort of the challenges that countries have had over time. Our lack of investment in digital infrastructure, our lack of investment in affordable housing, but also housing that is actually fair and dignified for populations. It's brought into our weak health systems. So COVID simply, and it did that overnight, right? So normally it comes in silos. This time we saw everything. It brought into focus a lot of our supply chains that are always outward looking, not necessarily looking inward. And that's what the Africa Trade Area, I think, has been looking at trying to remedy. But now we do not have time. So I think for me, COVID has basically told us, listen, over the last many years, these were the missed opportunities around investing in things that matter. Because COVID has affected how we live, learn, and work simultaneously. And so I think in building forward strong, and maybe I love this word that is building back better stuff, is to the extent that how do we reimagine the African continent to the extent of doing things that matter? How do we invest? And technology can enable this. How do we invest in a healthcare system that is heavily data-driven, that can create equitable access through platforms that Africans have? Many Africans right now have mobile phones. So can we find a way to innovate around that? Education system, schools are on a shutdown. How can we quickly invest in education systems, but work with technologists? I mean, these 19 to 25-year-olds are the experts. It is actually a mindset. Experts in technology are no longer your PhDs or your professors. If they are innovating and transforming lives to their communities, how can we invest in that so that they scale? Because for me, the proverbial challenge with the African tech ecosystem or innovations that actually do things that matter in our lives can't scale, and simply because of investments. The third bit that I think is food systems, and you and I think are champions in this. As much as we do everything else, food systems, I think, is the most important part of what we do. As much as COVID was a health crisis, it is in Africa increasingly a food crisis. So to the extent is, how do we ensure that we actually reinvest, especially in smart agriculture, climate smart agriculture, so that we can build our food systems? How do we invest in data? It's sad that very few countries in Africa have done an agriculture census since independence. So how do we know our food systems? How do we get young people interested in food systems, not necessarily farming? The average age of a farmer right now is 58. I think for me, those are fundamentals. Once we get the basics right, then we move beyond these bread and butter issues to sort of emancipate our imaginations, because I think for me, that's the issue. We simply are too busy dealing with everyday challenges that we cannot imagine. So how do we then use our innovations to deal with that piece so that we can aspire to the Agenda 2063 and to the promises that we've had from our founding fathers since our independence?
So I just want to go back to this issue of mindset, because when we read about Africa and technology, we're always hearing about this issue of leapfrogging. And so I just want to go back to that. I know you spoke to it a little bit, but why does the word leapfrogging bother you so much?
Because it speaks of a defined future, right? And that's the problem I have. And being African, I do not think that the future of Nairobi is LA, because I know the problems in LA, right? I don't want to think the future of Lagos is in New York, because we see the problems in New York. So my sense is that, and I think there are a lot of innovators in this room, I see the panelists in that. I think of disruption, right? This is our DNA. We disrupt, right? And to the extent of disruption, it means then we do not necessarily have to aspire to a defined future. We are aspiring to the endless of possibilities, and I think that's always been an African spirit. Despite all the challenges we've had, we are always looking at what is possible. And so with technology, I think we can do more, as long as we are not boxed or thought that is our future. So that's my own belief, and I think it's been doing me well over the last couple of years.
So really, thank you for that. It was for me, this idea of how leapfrogging was really about trying to conform to a mindset that isn't ours is a really, really interesting one. And just to go back to Destiny's song around Tomorrow Will Come. So if you go back to your own journey from Kibera to being a global leader, working in terms of advising senior leadership in the country, advising senior leaders globally, and also shaping a major university that has reach all over the world. How do you see, what are the critical parts of mindset disruption that we need to really cultivate as Africans and Africans in the diaspora?
I think, and you mentioned Thunderbird, and that's why I love being a part of this, a part of this family, is because first of all, I think the first mindset is, I think, inclusivity. I think it's just being open. And to the extent, because then you can learn a lot just by listening. And that's important, especially in a continent that, I mean, it's full of inequalities, there are lessons everywhere, but then you can draw a lot of inspiration. And that's where I think innovators in Africa draw their inspiration, because of the adversity that we have. The second thing is a growth mindset, and that's something we say at Thunderbird a lot, is you must be willing to grow. And growth can take any direction. The third piece that I think is important is humility. I think it's being humble. It's to the extent that, you we don't know everything. And I think that's why we have a diaspora network, right? It means then just by being collective, we can draw inspiration, but then we can move collaboratively towards a desired future. I always say desired, not defined, because there's something that we all aspire. I think for me, those really, I think for me, are always the fundamentals. And then thinking through, because I know that the topic really is on technology, I always come to say, listen, technology is a cultural artifact. It will change, right? But we must invest in people, because ultimately, it's the next generation that will wield the next. So how are we equipping the next generation of Africans to always be at the forefront of understanding, right? Because it's not an arms race and it's not about competition. I think for me, it's about wielding this technology for our own development, but also for the public good, because sometimes own development is very selfish. But then how can we ensure that we wield this for public good? And we've seen this, and you mentioned COVID-19, right? So we've seen how technology startups have come together in Africa, whether it's building contact tracing apps, whether it's helping frontline health workers, whether it's moving goods and services because of broken supply chains, whether it's improving farm inputs, whether it's connecting women who are suffering gender violence to services. So we've seen that, and all this is done by just African prowess and the tools that we have. And so I think for me, those are really what I really want to put in a frame. Okay.
So the other thing I just want to mention, so Philip and I, before COVID, we're in Davos together at the World Economic Forum, where Philip convened a session on smart cities. And what would you say in terms of co-creating our African destiny? How would you see smart cities, but also smart rural areas?
Yeah, so I mean, and this is something that I think we've been talking about, and our dean at the school, Dean Kagram, has been quite fundamental in this. It's to the extent that smart cities speak to some utopic city that has, you can imagine the Jetsons, for those who grew up watching that cartoon. It's to the extent that, I mean, you can still be a village and run smart systems. It doesn't have to be your shiny space. It's simply, how do you modernize your systems to be able to accommodate the cultural, the economic, the social aspects of that village? And so, I mean, I really like to give a shout out to countries like Niger that are saying, listen, we will build smart villages, because first of all, that's democratizing the whole concept of smartness around technology adoption, whether there's a green economy or not. Right? So for countries who are able to do the big cities like Kenya or Senegal, then we're seeing them going to that direction. But then for me, that's not enough. Again, it becomes those shiny ivory towers that are not connected. What must be our future is that every part of Africa must develop. There's no more point of one piece shines than the other, because ultimately we realize, and if COVID-19 has told us anything, is that we are connected. And so development cannot be for a few. It has to be for everybody, but again, collective. And so we have to move forward, I think. And that's why when you talk about smart cities, it's how do we think, because cities are really the future. So how do we think of cities as more that space where then it's more inclusive, but also it's more green, and also because the future is going to be all about that, and more safer, both for women, but also for looking for jobs. But then it's just not about, and this is interesting, so it's just not about the building. And what is African for us is the processes are more important than the destination. So how do we ensure that even getting to whatever smart destination we're thinking about, that we've not left everybody behind, but also everybody's symbol, including culture, are part of that journey.
Okay. So I'm getting some pushback around leapfrogging and setting that aside.
That's
and
my
so,
view. It's my view. I was very clear. That's my understanding.
So the pushback is we need foundational technological infrastructure. And so how do you see that?
See, leapfrogging does not, and that's what I said, even when you need foundational technology infrastructure, it means that, for example, I'll give you an example in Kenya, right? I mean, none of us understand what a fixed line is, right? We understand mobile. So when you tell me, so my sense is that even when I say leapfrogging, it just means that I want a future that is tied to our context, that we're not pushed towards building an infrastructure that does not make sense to us. right? So in that collective co-creation of a technology foundational infrastructure, it must have meaning for us. There's no point of putting a big data center, for example, because we've seen a model in country A or B, because they have stable power. We can do it differently. And so for me, that's just not, that's when I say disruption, not leapfrogging. It means we can disrupt the model and say, listen, data centers for us will mean something. It's a data center as a foundational infrastructure, but then we will not model it the same way as anybody has done it somewhere else, because, and believe me, this is the problem we have right now, because some of my friends, unfortunately, countries will remain unnamed, have done it. But because of our past failures, they're just not working very well.
So I think you're gaining a lot of momentum in the chat, and people are agreeing deeply with what you're saying. And just to move us forward, the interface of connectivity, infrastructure, and sustainability, because some say the fifth industrial revolution is going to be green economies. So how do you see us deliberately in Africa and in this, that with diaspora support, harnessing the most of digitalization towards sustainability?
Yeah, I think for me, then I'll go back into the foundation pieces, right? When we talk about the current architecture, right, of the fourth industrial revolution, what are the pillars, right? So the pillars is one, demography, right? I think for me, we should not lose the people. How do we skill, reskill, and upskill our population so that they're always at the forefront of this emerging technologies? That's one. Two, data. And you and I think this is what we hammer every day. You can't talk about artificial intelligence without your own data. How do we invest in data? Of course, we with all the protections around it, because I know Africa is being data mined every day. How do we protect and invest in our own data so that it works for our own development, and so that we can negotiate? Because right now, I don't think we have any negotiating power. I always laugh, because when I tell people, for example, now when you see this 5G war per se, we are watching, right? Because it has nothing to do with Africa. Yet we may be drawn into this at a certain time. So what are we doing about it? Because we haven't invested in the systems. The third bit, of course, is energy. And this is why you talk about the fifth being green energy, right? So we still are at the least electrified continent in the world. Yet technology runs on a form of power energy. So how do we disrupt the notions of energy and power to create either smart greens or other green sources of energy, and the sun? I mean, we have abundance of sun. How do we invest in solar? Unfortunately, some of our governments are still investing in hydro and the rest. So how do we think through this? I think for me, those are the fundamental pillars, right? So how do we, and that will carry us, because there's no, and that's why my problem of leapfrogging, right? You have to build on the last revolution. We just did not do that very well. So we still have to go back to the second and the third. And so harness the fourth, and then build resilience in the fifth.
So one of the things that comes out, so we've talked about disruption, the need for distributed grids in terms of how we move forward, and that's really critical. You and I have talked a lot about this technological age and literacy. How are you seeing literacy being redefined right now?
I think it's to the extent, again, and you can look at this, and this is context, and again, I'll point to Nivi. I love her work around Elimu. I think for me, there's, and this is, again, let's go back to mindset, right? And we know a lot of our African cultures or the education systems have a very linear way of progression, right? So when you think through that, I know friends who simply said, listen, at the end of the day, the woman in the village who wants to sell her groceries, she does not necessarily have to go through a certain set of curriculum simply to be able to harness a certain tool to run her business. Can't we just simply focus on what tools she can be enabled to use to run her business? And it doesn't have to be in English. This is how we've lost our languages, and we continue to lose our languages as technologies and our cultures. Why can't we think about local content, and so that she simply uses, ultimately, if I'm going to that village, everybody speaks that dominant language. Why am I trying to get her to speak English? Because technology is in English. So why aren't we building based on our own culture, understanding, and context? So for me, that's how I think about literacy. But then it doesn't mean that a school like mine cannot then package our sort of trainings on business in that language so that she gets the business skills without the extra burden of a language that she doesn't understand or she doesn't need basically in that particular space. So that's basically how I see it in that sense. This is why, I mean, and they will tell you for an overused word, and I like to use this example. For those of you who know our mobile money platform, which is M-Pesa, I always tell people there is no single workshop that I had that anybody was being trained on how to use M-Pesa. I've never had it. Or others, you would have done a workshop for 16 million people. Now I think 30 million Kenyans who are on a mobile money platform. Everybody, because it was useful, they found a way to use it. And now everybody's transacting on that platform. So per se, you can see how technology innovation, if it's useful, is challenging the old notions that we had. And so I think for me, when you talk about literacy, how can we then ensure that we respond based on context, but also be able to mediate? And that's really our job. We are intermediaries. Because also remember, they also have knowledge. We can learn from a lot of guys and on that side. So how are we intermediaries? Simply being a conduit to ensure that people understand on how to harness these new tools and technologies. But then when they are ready to move into or to scale up, then we skill them at that particular point.
Great. So the chat box is going wild, and I know Almaz would like to bring in the panelists. And so please, Almaz, take over. Well, so Philip, I hope you can stay for the panel discussion.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, excellent.
I'm
okay, great.
Well,
Almaz.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, Philip, what I decided to do is we are going to harness all of these chats and really put them in some kind of a package and as part of the action summary and next steps that we always send out. Thank you, guys were wonderful. Thomas, where are you? This is all yours. And I want to welcome Amoreti, Joseph, Nivi, and Thomas. I know Thomas very well, and I want to thank you, Thomas, for making this possible today. Thank you for your friendship. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Almaz, Megan, the entire ADN team for making this happen. As Almaz mentioned, we are a long-time supporter of this platform, and it's lovely to see it grow and flourish. And we appreciate all that you do in engaging both the diaspora community and the African, the continent itself. Also, be remiss not to mention, huge fan of Philip and Elaine. Thank you for that conversation. It's hard to follow up a robust conversation as what Philip did. Now, I hope that we don't disappoint you, at least having a seamless conversation that goes beyond what we just discussed. So I think what we're going to do today, at least the rest of this panel, would be a context of connectivity, but more importantly, a bit of a storytelling element of it. So I want to start by talking to you guys about in 2000, the beginning of the millennium, the whole of Africa had less international internet bandwidth than Luxembourg, which is the size of a smaller state like Rhode Island here in the US. And there were lots of talks at that time by the World Bank, UN agencies, that the new millennium will be the decade of Africa, especially its connectivity. So there was lots of private and public commitments of rolling out undersea, fiber optics and all that kind of infrastructure. And at that time, connectivity was also almost a foregone conclusion that it will happen. And what we need to focus is, once Africa is connected, what will happen to it? What other type of things will come up? In that era, in that 1999, 2000 era, I was in graduate school. I'm at the risk of aging myself. And I remember I was quite captivated by that vision that people have been talking about in 2000. But I was mesmerized and captivated by the news of this connected continent. And I, being a grad school student and entrepreneurial person, I recruited a friend of mine and started actually an African startup that was going to be, at that time, you're going to laugh about this, but the Yahoo of Africa. At that time, Yahoo was the thing. There was no Google, Yahoo was the thing. Because we were going to build this infrastructure, this platform that is going to be on this connected continent. And mind you, this is at the height of the dot-com bubble and eventual burst. And so needless to say, I'm talking to you as a government employee. Needless to say that we did not make it. That startup did not make it. Didn't make it beyond the startup valley of death. But now, 20 years later, 2 decades later, despite some progress, much of Africa is still unconnected. And large populations are not realizing the full potential of this connectivity because digital infrastructure investments have been lagging. I recall a new report by ITU and UNESCO is calling for urgent action to close this internet gap. I think they're estimating about $100 billion are needed to connect the entire continent by 2030. So 2030 is a magical year because of the SDGs. And so there's a lot of investments that are required to make that happen. There are, of course, other barriers. I think Philip and Elaine mentioned it. There are affordability questions, both on the service side and the handsets. The policy, regulatory, and the fiscal environment that in the continent, and the status of obviously digital skills, gender, age, education, the entire gamut of socioeconomic issues are becoming hindrance for the continent to take advantage of the connectivity. And the US government has been a huge supporter of Africa's connectivity efforts. As my old agency, OPIC, now called DFC, was one of the early backers of private equity firms in the late 1990s and early 2000s that fueled the growth of mobile growth that we are talking about now in Africa. And currently even DFC is investing more than $1 billion in economic growth and connectivity over its flagship Connect Africa initiative. And USAID's work and Power Africa is a critical one because power and connectivity intimately go hand in hand. And I also encourage everyone to read USAID's new digital strategy that outlines the agency's commitment to inclusive connectivity. We recognize, obviously, digital rights are human rights, but most importantly, the systems that power these rights should be trusted, should be value-driven, and most importantly, people-centered. This includes the huge drive to 5G, and a true and trusted 5G is going to be critical for Africa to ensure access and democracy across the cyberspace. And my small but mighty office within the Department of State has been an early backer of startup ecosystem for the last decade, which brings me to a story even the panelists do not know, but how the three distinguished speakers that we have today, that I have the pleasure and delight of moderating, are interconnected. In June 2010, McKinsey released a very iconic report called Lions on the Move. And that report basically charted that the decade, the new millennia that is coming in, again, the same was the World Bank was talking about, that Africa is emerging. I think at that time, 7 out of the 10 fastest growing economies were in Africa, and the emergence of Africa was imminent, and tremendous amount of FDI was going to flow, which it did. And at that time, we at the department, my office, were thinking about, so how does this narrative that Africa is emerging will work in terms of how can the US, America can contribute to that emergence. So we honed on innovation and startups. And out of that, we said, let's create a program that essentially connects America's ecosystem to Africa's ecosystem. And we built a new partnership called Lions Africa, which was tribute to the Lions on the Move naming. We're in government, you can't do anything if it's not an acronym. It was, I think, called Liberalizing Innovation Opportunity Nations, what's called Lions Africa. And we recruited Microsoft, Nokia, World Bank for Deaf, the African Development Bank, all these kind of important Africa players to come forward and see this vision that Africa is emerging, that America and the globe can actually help this emergence even develop even more. So at that time, we needed a platform to announce this great initiative that we're putting together. And Amrote Abdullah, who's one of our panelists, were at the World Economic Forum. She was busy about to host the West Africa Summit in Addis. So we contacted her and we pitched her that this vision that we had. She loved it. She gave us a platform to announce it in May of 2012, Alliance Africa. And within a short period of time, we announced it May 2012, and by October, we hosted the first flagship initiative called Demo Africa. Some of you I see here who are participating been at this forum called Demo Africa. And this was an inaugural forum. An amazing cadre of startups were emerging. One of those startups were none other than Nivi with her e-Limu platform. So I recall meeting her, was impressed by her groundbreaking platform at that time. This is again about 8 years ago, that she actually foresaw the importance of digital education platforms to do that. And at the same time, Joseph was the other panelist, was at Intel Africa. And I first met him there because he came to witness what this Demo Africa is all about. So I give you that story to let you know that these three individuals that I have the pleasure of moderating are the OGs of advocates and doers of Africa's emerging technology agenda. And I feel like $1 million, so to speak, for me to be able to moderate them because their wisdom and their experiences will be phenomenally valuable to all of you who are participating in that. So that is all you're probably gonna hear from me. I'm gonna try to stay silent and let these amazing folks kind of discuss their viewpoints of connectivity. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with Nivi, and then Amrote and Joseph in that order, for them to give you their kind of opening remarks of their thoughts about where Africa is emerging, and especially in the connectivity landscape and how the whole COVID-19 might be impacting it. So Nivi, please take it from there, and we'll go in order, then we'll go into Q&As, and this is gonna be awesome. Go ahead, Nivi.
I'm so glad that you remember me, and that was such a long time ago and such a haze when I was so young and so naive about the e-learning platform I was launching then. Yeah. So now, and you know, it's great. That's a great background story, because back in 2010, I launched this platform we digitized the entire Kenyan curriculum and said children can revise here. We went on to digitize a literacy platform, and you know, the school after school we went to, and we wanted to make sure we were going to underserved schools, underserved academically, financially, would say, oh, this is great. We can see why those schools that are using your platform are improving their grades. We can see why children are learning to read when you put reading in this context, in local languages and with local context. And our students don't know A for apple because they've never eaten an apple before. They don't know what F for fox is because they've never seen a fox before, because we don't have foxes in Kenya. But we don't have a computer lab. We don't have a laptop. We don't have a smartphone. We don't even have internet here. So how do we use this eLimu platform? So we kept running into, as an education content provider, this barrier of infrastructure and connectivity. And that really marked my transition into BRIC and you know, thinking about the problems around connectivity. And we've identified three main barriers to digital access. One is actual access, like do people have a signal around them? Do people have a smartphone in their hands at the very least? We know that only 10% of households in Africa have a computer. We know that according to that ITU survey, less than 30% of people in Africa are using the internet. And when we think about getting a smartphone in someone's hand, in Sierra Leone, the average person needs to save 6 months of their salary to buy the cheapest available smartphone in that market. So it's, you know, it's not an easy problem to solve. And then when we think about the access of signal, that, you know, a mobile network operator will look at a village and say, well, these people are poor, there's not very many of them. We're not going to put a $200,000 tower here. There's going to be no ROI on our business here. So these people don't get a signal. They don't get a 4G signal. They may not even get a 3G or a 2G signal. The second barrier to connectivity is affordability. And, you know, Philip talks about this, but we often think that solving for connectivity is a technology problem. But unfortunately, even as techies working in the space, we find that sometimes it's a business model problem. Making mobile data costs just cheaper isn't enough. We need to make data and digital access and connectivity ubiquitous. I don't think twice before, if my daughter has a weird rash, of Googling it and figuring out what's wrong and what I should stop in her diet and so on. And it's just perpetual and ubiquitous, and we take it for granted. We don't think about that carpenter who thinks about whether he should switch on his data, send that WhatsApp message to a customer, whether he should download that image, whether he should go to Pinterest and browse for inspiration. And we just take that for granted. So I think one of the first steps we need to take when thinking about connectivity is really empathize with what the reality on the ground is. And it's not, connectivity is by no means ubiquitous and perpetual. And affordability is a big, big barrier for that. And at BRIC, we're thinking we have to disrupt this model, not with better technology, but with a new business model. Disrupt this idea that someone has to reach into their pocket and find money and buy for a data bundle, but they don't have that money in their pocket. What they might have is time and attention. So can we get them to pay for connectivity with time and attention rather than with money? And the third barrier to connectivity is digital literacy. You know, in assessment after assessment we speak to people who said, yes, I'm online. We do Facebook. And Facebook and WhatsApp might be as far as they go. But really, this is the largest, greatest network of knowledge and information in the world. And if people are only using it for Facebook, WhatsApp, maybe sports betting, that's been a big driver of people getting online, frankly, in Kenya, and very unfortunately. Pornography, you know, all of these things that people don't understand, that there's more to do out there, that there's better ways to leverage all the knowledge out there, and also to distill that knowledge and understand what's real and factual and useful versus what might be a waste of time and not so great for improving your livelihoods. So from my point of view, connectivity is at the heart of everything. You know, we often think about the pillars of development, this holy trinity of health, education, and agriculture. And now it's e-health and e-learning and, you know, e-agriculture, m-farming. But at the base of that, like, none of that can be built without these foundational building blocks of connectivity. And that often gets forgotten when we're in the development circles, that we must invest in connectivity. And when you think about COVID, people have harped on about how connectivity has changed education, learning, e-commerce, but how many foundations that we know of, how many governments that we know of have really put money where their mouth is, have really funded connectivity? And from where I'm sitting, it's not enough. So I'm really happy to be here, really excited to talk about the ways in which we can overcome these barriers, and also what we'll do once we overcome them of great importance.
Thank you. Amrote?
Thank you. Look, I think it's super difficult to go after Tigo and then Philip, but then more importantly to go after Nivi. So let me do this because they have said and given all the punchlines. Let me maybe pivot a little bit more in terms of the opportunities that we see, right? So number one, definitely I think affordability and access is going to be sort of the fundamental in terms of what we need to build on. My friend Philip, I agree with you that, you know, you don't necessarily have to westernize to modernize, but, you know, sometimes if you don't have to push past open doors, then let's also take advantage around some of the learnings that we have as well. But I think in addition to sort of the connectivity piece, there's also an element that we need to think about, which is around skills, right? And I don't think we really pay enough attention. Yes, you know, we have enough developers who are developing sort of, you know, here and there, but, you know, we have to go as Africa beyond the dancing elephants. And how do we actually compete? How do we build the next sort of skills talent that can really draw Africa to be sort of the landmark for outsourcing, for instance, as an area, by building sort of a mass number of skills in IT that can compete with sort of East Asia. So we're not there yet in terms of even prioritizing what we will do to drive connectivity to the next level, right, in terms of adoption, utilization. And then I think I'll come to sort of then the governance of it, which I think is really sort of the big piece. Whether you're looking at health, agriculture, education, there's an element that we really have to work on, which is, do we understand sort of what data governance needs to look like, right? Do we have a full grasp, right? We talk about data residency, we talk about sort of data center building as sort of the in thing of, you know, infrastructure building and investment that we need to make. Perhaps there is a space for it. But where we can actually leverage our dollars and cents to be able to sort of use cloud computing, for instance, to allow us to then redirect some of our investment, I think there we have an opportunity to really fast track sort of our own adoption and our own transformation. So I would hinder sort of, you know, and sort of really stick to governance, because I think governance is an area that we need to really be mindful of, intentional about, because the relevance and utilization around technology will really very much dependent on sort of decisions that we make today will affect the next generation to come. And then I think to that extent, then I think, Philip, I'll come closer to government, which is how do we actually educate also our government in understanding sort of the ins and outs around security, for instance, right? You know, if we're having our government officials, you know, chatting on Yahoo, we're not entirely sure about sort of data security, right? So how do we actually not just build something, but also protect what's ours as well, right? And that I think it becomes super critical. So then I think sort of as we look at it is then how do we then galvanize sort of the business model? I think that becomes key. We don't necessarily have to leave it all to government. We don't necessarily have to leave it all to telcos, but what are the new ways and innovative ways that we can actually then unlock new opportunities and new models, business models that allows for extending that reach and connectivity that has been talked about. And so from our end, we've been investing heavily in TV white spaces, and this is where sort of, you know, the partnership, but also the insight, the foresight of our policymakers becomes even critical in allowing for unused spectrum to become available, right? Year to date, we have 23 of those licenses up and running in Africa, which is nowhere near enough to be able to really make a dent. So how do we fast track that and allow for sort of, you know, the grit and the determination, the vision to be able to make sure that we stay on par with some of, you know, the iconic sort of examples that are being given around Africa, be it M-Pesa, be it sort of, you know, the Silicon Valley that has been dubbed. How do we actually make that across the board so that we can actually sustain it as well? So with that, let me pause and allow for Joseph to take it forward.
Awesome, thank you. Quite eloquent. Joseph.
Hey, Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. Thanks, Amarote, and all the speakers that came before me. Amarote, if you thought it was difficult to say something after the previous 4 speakers, imagine, you know, speaking after you and all the above. So there is really not much left to be said. But I'm thankful that I've been invited to take part in this conversation. It is an important conversation, and I think it's one that has been going on for quite some time. As Thomas mentioned, we connected back in the 2011, 2012 timeframe. We've been talking about this for the last decade. And even though the discussion hasn't really changed, the people doing the discussion have changed. And I think that's actually progress. Back in 2010, 2011, conversations were being had with international companies, the World Bank, and USAID or US government, but there were very, very few Africans actually present in those discussions. But things have changed now. We're having this discussion and are being led by Africans themselves. And I think that's a big progress. Part of the conversation that Eliane and Philip had was around this issue of technology responding to the needs. I think one of the challenges we've seen on the continent is that we've had a technology-first approach. So people were dumping technology on the continent, but they were not actually connecting that technology to the needs of the people. What am I supposed to use this for? If you bring it and indicating that I'm coming to solve your problem, I'm more likely to pay attention than if you tell me, here's the technology and figure out what to use it for. And I think that Philip gave a very good example around the M-Pesa and the fact that no one is giving up workshop about it, how to use it. But it came to address a specific problem that people had. It wasn't something that just came up and then people are trying to figure out how to get people to use it. No, there was a problem and somebody came up with a way to address that specific problem. So I think that we really need to adopt this demand-driven approach when we're introducing technology. And it is the only way that we're going to increase adoption from the sense of people actually taking that technology. Now, when we have this conversation around connectivity, I think it is really a matter of the narrative. How do we talk about it, and in what context do we talk about it? If, for example, I walk to a MTN or Safaricom or any other telco and I tell them, hey, would you consider reducing your prices by 10 cents? You know, they're probably going to laugh me out of the office and say, why would I do that? But guess what? A study, an economic study commissioned by the ITU found out that when you reduce mobile broadband price by 10%, it increases adoption of the bandwidth by 3.1%. So I reduced that by 10 cents, but now I have more people, you know, uptaking my services, which means I'm going to make up the 10 cents that I reduced even more. I even make another profit on top of that. So it really is the way in which we have this discussion that is going to drive the investment, because these are huge investments. Thomas referenced the $100 billion investment that's needed for us to reach universal access to broadband on the continent. By that number, it looks like it's a huge amount of money. But when you see the dividend that comes out of that investment, sadly it pales in comparison. So I think we need to also investigate and change the way in which we're having this conversation to be able to drive investment both from the private sector and also from the government sector. So let me just pause at that and then leave it to discussion.
Awesome, great, phenomenal. Thank you, Joseph. As you all kind of seen the three-dimensional views of these amazing folks, one thing I want to bring in, you know, the first question I would have is you know, the biggest elephant in the room, or in a sense, we all are in a room because of it, is the COVID-19 issue. And how do you see, I mean, there's an old saying that says a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And this crisis obviously brings opportunities. Obviously, the challenges are right in front of our faces. But what do you see this COVID-19 disruption is going to bring about change, both in the sense of urgency and also the flow of investment that need to happen to increase connectivity? Because we've seen the resiliency that happened in some of the Western markets have been because they are connected, they have high connectivity levels, both on the education side, on digital commerce side, and almost all aspects, including e-government. So I'd love to hear your respective views, how COVID-19 will reshape this conversation. So therefore, the next decade conversation will have the outcomes of the conversations will be different. So I'll start with Amrote first, and then Nivi, and then Joseph, in that order, in terms of like your views, how COVID-19 is impacting this conversation. Amrote?
Yeah, look, I think with COVID-19, let me just put it this way: we cannot unsee what we have seen. I mean, we have crossed into a territory that we cannot go back to, and that is from business continuity. That's from adoption of sort of technology that has been fastly uptaken, including areas like agriculture, where we wouldn't necessarily think, you know, what the impact of that would be around food security as well. So from a business decision-making point of view, I think, frankly, you know, it's a crisis that has really allowed us to sort of fast track the technology adoption agenda even forward, right? So projects that have been put back on the back burner for sort of 3-4 years slate have now come sort of top priority in terms of investment. And as we as Microsoft sort of continue to look at areas where we need to fast track that adoption, we really see an opportunity. And again, sort of, you know, education has come to mind. Phil talked about it, which is that, you know, if other markets and if other developed markets perhaps perhaps not necessarily the US, Thomas, are allowing for online learnings and curriculums to be adopted across the board. We look at countries like UAE. Why can't we get to that stage without necessarily impacting the continuity around education, right? So there's an opportunity for us to sort of go forward and hard into some of these sectors, education, health primarily, from a response, but also from a recovery perspective. But the far-reaching impact around technology adoption now today really gives us an opportunity to be in a place that we would not honestly have foreseen ourselves being 10 years from now.
Great.
Zamorte was saying, you know, we can't unsee what we've seen already. So, you know, hopefully the rest of the world, the developed world, have seen we can't go back to work the way we used to work. We can't go back to education the way we used to work. And it's, you know, when we think about the people that we serve at BRIC through the Mojo public Wi-Fi, we know that people are no longer huddled around televisions waiting to hear what's next, waiting to hear the government tell them what to do next. And I really hope that we're able to, you know, understand that we can't just give information. It's not a one-way information street anymore. And, you know, don't just tell us what to do, wear a mask, maintain distance, wash your hands, sanitize, but explain to us why. And that links into the education thing as well, because I've said this before, and now it's especially important that technology will not replace teachers. But teachers who do not use technology well will be replaced by teachers who do. So, you know, the sad thing is that there are some great leaps being made in technology, especially ed tech right now. And all the examples you can think of using AI, machine learning for adaptive learning and personalized learning interventions, all of those great, amazing ed tech innovations we see right now will only deepen the global inequality. Eliane touched on this a little bit, but there's no silver bullet. Like, the gap between the haves and the have-nots will just deepen with all the leaps and strides we're making for the haves. And I really hope that the whole world is looking and saying, well, how do we make sure that we take everyone along with us on this ride? When we're trying to do e-learning and e-commerce, how do we make sure that everyone has that basic access, that basic digital access to be a part of that conversation, to be a part of that classroom, to be a part of that business that's online now?
Awesome. Joseph.
That's a very good point, and that both Amrota and Nivi made. I think, you know, in as terrible this pandemic has been, especially in the cost of life lost, and also the economic damages it's done to the world. It also has done something that I would consider positive, in a sense of it has changed the conversation around technology. Before COVID, technology was seen as an add-on, right? If you talk about digital economy, you would have to talk about economy first, and then you talk about digital economy, as if it's not the same economy you're talking about. If you talk about education technology, it would be like, oh, you talk about education, and then you talk about technology. So it's always been an add-on, right? But with the COVID-19, with this pandemic, it's no longer the case, because reality is today we cannot talk about education and leave out technology, because kids are not in school, right? And you cannot talk about economy without talking about digital economy, because we were in lockdowns not too long ago. You know, almost every country has gone into a lockdown except one or two. And people have had to deal with that aspect of being locked down. People are calling in the groceries and ordering online. The grocery gets delivered to your house. In type of a city setting. But the point is that every aspect of our lives is now being touched with technology. We can't, to Amrote's point, you can't unsee what you've seen. I mean, government today are the ones leading the conversation on how to incorporate technology in delivering education. A year ago, 2 years ago, you had to beg them to have that conversation because they saw like, oh, I have to go build schools and I don't have teachers, and now you're telling me about technology. And so I think that has changed, and to a large part is because of this pandemic that we've had to face. So that old adage of necessity being the mother of invention is really playing out today, right? And so that's sort of like a good thing. What I think also is that it's allowing us to think out of the box. Sub-Saharan Africa is on its way to having about 1 million teacher shortage. We have a gap of 1 million teachers, and we have a gap of classroom, the infrastructure alone, that is tremendous. So if we continue to think the way we've been thinking in the past, we are not going to fill those gaps. It's just impossible. We don't have the means to do that. But with the use of technology, we can come up with innovative ways to address these needs and fill those gaps. I'm not saying everything goes technology, but we will use technology to come up with innovative ways of addressing these issues. And I think this pandemic has forced us years into that conversation. And lastly, the point that I'll make is that there were a lot of conversation around when you bring up a technology-based initiative around the affordability. We can't afford this education app because we don't have a way of getting people, getting it to people. Fast forward to the, February, March time of this year, with the pandemic just hitting, suddenly the telcos and the government are getting together and they're zero rating education content, right? Things that they could have done 10 years ago, but now they're doing today. It's just showing that the possibility is much closer than where we thought it was. So I think this is sort of like the impact of the COVID-19, the bad and the good of that equation.
So,
Thomas, can I add something?
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
I've heard this so many times about innovation and entrepreneurship and necessity being the mother of innovation. And one day I was listening to a lady called Oreo Kolo speak on a panel. And she said this, and I must point this out on this panel, that we can't entrepreneur our way out of everything. At some point, government has to pull their socks up. At some point, government has to step in. I'll give you an example. When I talked about access and the mobile network operator not wanting to put up a $200,000 tower in Laikipia, Daraja. We figured out an open source technology where we could put up a tower for $25,000 and do a B2B sales on that to recover our investment. We don't even require those residents to put their hands in their pockets and pay for that connectivity. And they would have a SIM card with 4G data and so on. But we didn't get the spectrum. And so there's a big oligopoly of mobile network operators that sit on spectrum. And Amrote wrote a wonderful article. I'm going to post the link to that about this, about barriers to connectivity. And she mentions this about government needing to open up spectrum. And spectrum being, I don't know how familiar everyone on this call is, but there's a limited amount of spectrum and governments sell it usually to the highest bidder. So all the fat cats own it. Microsoft were very smart in figuring out this TV white space, this unallocated spectrum that they ended up using. But if a big mobile network operator is got the most popular spectrum that most devices use, it's just they can sit on it, they cannot use it, and no small player, no one can innovate in a place where that mobile network operator is not even interested in playing using that spectrum. So that's a big policy change that should be pushed for, is that spectrum needs to be allocated dynamically and geographically. And if you don't use it, you should lose it. And without that, that's one of the major steps that we can take to unlock innovation and entrepreneurship to fix some of these necessities that we speak about.
Awesome, good perspective. Philip, if you're still here with us, I would love to bring you into this conversation. What's your thoughts, at least on the COVID-19 conversation that just Joseph talked about, where now governments and the public-private collaboration is happening by sheer they have to, in a sense, to address this issue. So do you have any thoughts on that, Philip?
I think so, and that's what I was saying. I think I was typing in the chat. It's just not about, I think, even rethinking the model of what a PPP is, right? So I think for Africa, it's about, it needs to be a PPDP. So there's a new term that is, again, evolving in this space. It needs to be a development partnership. And I think it raises the question of what Nivi is talking about. Because some things are not necessarily, have no economic value, but have public good value. And so I think for me, governments as the holder of public good needs to think that way more than coalesce around private companies. I think my sense is that, again, it's a mind shift, right? If technology now, and somebody has raised that, it's the engine of everything now. There's no separation between tech and life, tech and how we read, tech and how we work. And my sense is that how do we ensure that going forward, there's no separation, and that we understand that technology is the same way as a health service, is the same way as housing, the same way as education. And until we understand that, and this is my struggle, I think I have this discussion with Amrote a lot, that we need to go beyond champions. It can't just be a Philip champion. It has to be a way of government doing business.
That's awesome. So I'm going to go back to Joseph to let me go a little deeper on your current role at the Mastercard Foundation on the nexus between ICT and education. So have you seen any drive in that sense of at least your mandate, where it is before the COVID-19 and now post-COVID-19, how that has either shifted or have been amplified for you? And it would be also a great opportunity for your audience to kind of learn a little bit about how you work, so you can identify collaborators on this conversation.
Well, sorry, just before you go to Joseph,
sure,
can I just respond briefly to Philip?
Sure.
Look, I think you're absolutely right. There is nothing that scales better than government. And that's what I think we have to keep in mind. And perhaps, look, the other opportunity that we have across Africa, you have units like Smart Africa, right, that have been set up to drive sort of the digital transformation of Africa forward, right? It's a mandate, it's an entity sort of set up to really make sure, but we also need to hold each other accountable, right? And this is where I say sort of government needs to step in. Sort of digital economy is championed by Kenya, and other countries are championing different pillars of it. But how do we actually also hold each other accountable to make sure that we drive forward in delivering on that promise? And so, we can have the public-private partnerships, that's well and good. The development angle, definitely, absolutely. But ultimately, it has to be, as we're talking about connectivity, it's not just about having cheap phones and affordable sort of telco lines across the board. It has to mean something, right? And so the economic value that we are creating has to be able to sort of raise all boats across the board. And so I think there we have an opportunity to make sure that, from public to private, we have the intentionality, the accountability that we're pushing forward, but also just the sovereignty that we want to drive across Africa as well. Sorry, go ahead to Joseph.
Now I'm going to circle back with you, Amrote, on the business model side, but I'll let Joseph maybe talk a little bit about your own outfit and how that could actually support this connectivity journey.
Thanks, Thomas. And I think that I would be building on some of the conversations, some of the points that were made by Philip, as well as that comment from Amrote. But let me first just share a little bit about the Mastercard Foundation. So the Mastercard Foundation is a foundation that was established by the Mastercard company, but it's actually a completely separate organization from the mothership, so to speak. It has its own board of directors, and it has its own CEO and president, and operates independently from the Mastercard International, the company. It's actually 2 years ago, it crafted a Young Africa Work strategy, which aims to enable 30 million young Africans to acquire dignified and fulfilling jobs by the year 2030. So there is a target there for 30 million, a time frame to 2030, and everything we work is in essence contributing to achieving that goal. We are currently present in 7 countries and building on to be present in 10 countries. But we also have regional programs that go beyond the countries in which the foundation has established offices. The Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT, which is the department that I head, is tasked with ensuring that we tap into the power of technology to improve education learning outcome. And so really is working with the edtech entrepreneurs on the African continent, local edtech entrepreneurs, in crafting solutions, be it the technology or be it the services that go to address the need that we are seeing right now in education sector. So we wanted to get away from this technology first approach and instead do a demand-driven approach. So what we do is we engage those tasks in delivering education and understand the challenges from their point of view. We then look at those challenges to determine which ones technology can actually address. We translate that into a call for application, which we submit to the broader edtech ecosystem and ask them to propose solutions on how they would address that. Then we have a comprehensive support system to those who are selected, and we help them develop and implement their solutions, as well as connect them both from the private sector as well as the public sector. And in order for them not only to succeed, but to scale. And the only thing we ask is that you look at reaching a broader audience. Don't target just the private schools, but you want to make sure that these solutions are also reaching the public schools, because it is the goal of the foundation to be inclusive and to make sure that we are reaching those who are not being served. And so part of the package that we provide is these entrepreneurs, companies, is there is a grant, there is the training along the science of learning, because we want to make sure that their solutions are actually creating learning. There is a business support. There is also a monitoring and evaluation, learning monitoring and evaluation, because we want to make sure that when you're coming up with your solutions, you are including that, you are backing that into your solution from the onset. So you're able to measure how much impact you are actually generating. And that helps you in making your product better, but it also helps in showing how we can build on what you're doing in order to, again, to better the education, the learning outcome for all the students across Africa. Now, with COVID-19, it kind of hit us, like we just started with this cohort and COVID-19 hit. What we've seen is that a number of this cohort, the demand on their product just went through the roof. We have a few companies. One company that I would share with you with Lightmore in Kenya, actually, Nivi might know about it. But they had a platform, a learning platform that they had. And before COVID-19, they were barely getting 1,000 downloads in a month. After COVID-19, the first month of COVID-19, they hit 100,000 downloads on that app alone. We're working with Ineza, which is an SMS-based, they provide an SMS-based system. And during the COVID, they've seen over 400% increase in the usage of their product. Same thing we've seen with the Siavula in South Africa, with their platform just shooting up the roof. So those who are ready, the problems become the pressure on delivering more of it than they had planned. And those who are not ready, those who are, for example, required engaging teachers with face-to-face, what have you, those have struggled. So this has led to us saying, we need to look at the support we've been giving these folks. We need to look at the programs we have in place under the new reality of COVID-19 and re-examine, reimagine what we should do in 2021 and above. So we are in the process of that, undergoing this exercise. So, all the panelists and what have you, don't be surprised if I ping you to get some thoughts on what it is we could add into the program to make this even better.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, that's a good plug. And we're doing that conversation with you so to make sure that the audience actually can have an interface with you, because you guys are always looking. You have an amazing mission and drive and mandate and resources, and you're always looking for good ideas. So the audience, please, you should look to Joseph if you have any ideas on the EdTech side. So I'm going to then flip it to Amrote now from a business model perspective and from a Microsoft perspective. How do you see this? I know you guys you've already discussed the white space issue, but how you see the broader opportunities in Africa, both in the context of COVID-19, but also just in the context of other things?
Thanks, Thomas. Look, I think if the business model and cracking it, I think had it been easy, I think we would have had a wider coverage by now. The problem is exactly in that. So there are a couple of scenarios for us to look at, right? One is around sort of the public good services that is really a way for us to accelerate the business revenue model. And so in this instance, I'm talking and referring to work that we've done in Tanzania with the University of Dar es Salaam and Uhuru One as a service provider to be able to do a revenue share between the university and the telco provider around how do we actually extend coverage for students, bundle that with infrastructure and laptops to be able to sort of make sure that the learning experience is better and improved. But then the second one, which I think is actually an interesting one, slightly more fragmented, and I think where more players could actually help galvanize it, is around the SME space that we have, right? And so in Kenya in specific, working with Mawingu, which is one of our network providers, we have worked to create sort of 100,000 hotspots for SMEs to be able to connect, right? Now, what that does is it allows for sort of, your small mom and pop shop, or it allows for sort of an agro dealer to be able to access affordable connectivity. So I think there we have an opportunity to sort of collaborate more, but the revenue sort of share model is really one that I think one would allow for best practice sharing, but also allow for sort of more non-traditional players to come into the space.
Awesome, great. Nivi, I mean, your outfit, Brick, I've known Eric for a very long time, and you guys have been, a huge driver of ensuring that the affordability of the internet comes not to the few, but to everyone. And how do you see an opportunity for a business model like yours when you have big players coming in the connectivity space? And I'd love the other ones also to comment on this, but the issue of, I know Starlink is now dropping a lot of satellites with SpaceX, and there's also a lot of, the balloons from Google and there's drones from Facebook. There's a lot of connectivity investment that are being out there. How do you play that space? And obviously, I'm not suggesting that you're competing with them, but how do you see them as a complement? And
Philip laughing because you're right. These are big infrastructure projects, and they're great. We need that backbone, but the average phone can't connect to a satellite, right? You still need that last mile, that ground game. And Eric Hirschman, the CEO of Brick, wrote this wonderful blog post about ground shots. Like, yes, we need the big moon shots, but then we also need to ground them a little bit and bridge that last mile of getting it to your cell phone, to the school, to the hospital, to the clinic, to make sure that satellite is beaming down. So, interestingly, even when you think of the Google Loon, which is this amazing, brilliant idea of a project, and I know they're really struggling with the technical aspects of implementing and executing it the way that it was envisioned, but it's great because we thought of this and we said, well, they're covering this area in Laikipia, Baringo, but even though your phone can connect to that Google balloon, not if you can't afford it. You still have to pay for that connectivity. So we went and the way the Mojo business model works is we'll take that backhaul of Telkom, which is the mobile network operator in Kenya that's working with Google Loon on that. And we take that Telkom SIM card, put it in our device, our super brick, and we make a Wi-Fi hotspot. Everyone in this room can make a Wi-Fi hotspot with their smartphone. It's unlicensed Spectrum Wi-Fi, which is easy. But when you use a bigger device, you can have more concurrent users. And so we put it's just a proof of concept. We started it about 2 weeks ago. We put 10 devices in schools in those areas and said to the parents, you can walk to these schools. You can download the educational content that we have cached on this device. So even when the Google Loon is not working and you've walked all the way to the school, the content is still cached on our hardware. And every day or every week, we upload new lessons we're working with Bridge Academy for this, but we've got lessons from Khan Academy, from Ilimu, from Eneza, from Ikitabo, from all these education providers, and saying that you as a parent, you have a student in Standard 4, here's an English lesson for Wednesday. Here's a science lesson for Thursday. And there's a lesson for every day, because parents are really at a loss. And we think about all the problems with EdTech and we forget the parent who doesn't know what to do and who is also overworked and underpaid in another life. So, and then we make sure that the model is sustainable. So the Mojo model is that you as a user do not need to reach into your pocket and pay for this. We will work with Unilever. We will work with Amnesty International to pay us money to send you a message, because we know that all of us, including the people on this call, we give away about 3 hours of our time and attention for free every day to billboards, to Facebook ads, to Twitter ads, to promotions, and to someone wearing an Adidas t-shirt. 3 hours of our time and attention every day we're giving away for free. And the Mojo model is saying, well, we are going to actually give you value for this. So you will earn Mojo points for doing some work at a very basic level. That's watching a video advert. But really, we need to move our model away from digital work being more serious. That how can we actually put work in the hands of an African who has a smartphone with a 5-inch screen, maybe a crack on that screen? What kind of work can they really do to participate in this digital economy? And so you earn Mojo points and you spend Mojo points. You can spend Mojo points on connectivity, so 15 minutes of internet. You can spend Mojo points on your favorite comedian who's not monetizing well on YouTube. Maybe you'll watch him and we will monetize him with Mojo points. And what we've just piloted last month, which was so exciting, was actually putting food on the table. So maybe you can swap those Mojo points for a packet of noodles or a bag of flour or a packet of milk. We're worried about stumbling into the cryptocurrency space when we say things like that. But that's the digital promise. We started out thinking we're a hardware company doing connectivity, but actually connectivity is much more than that. What do people want to do with that connectivity? They want to participate in an economy. And how do we make that? And I might be aging myself, but for me, the homepage of the internet was Yahoo. And for you, Thomas, it might have been Netscape or I don't know, but what is that homepage of that internet for a non-native user? How do we provide that with the right digital literacy, the right information, the right balance of entertainment, without being completely paternalistic about this and saying, oh, well, if you're in Africa, all you need to watch is educational and healthcare and agriculture content. But here's the internet. And if you want to go and look at pornography, then you're free. You should be as free to do that as anyone living in New Jersey. So that's where our model is looking and saying, like, how do we, go beyond connectivity and take people into the digital economy to really participate in e-commerce, in e-learning, and so on.
Great. I know we're about to wrap up very quickly, but before I extend my last questions, I actually would love to ask a question about digital commerce, because there's a lot of talk in this conversation about EdTech, because obviously both Nivi's prior experience and Joseph's current work tend to focus on that. But what is the promise of digital commerce right now? I mean, obviously economic growth and jobs can only be created if there's a robust commerce infrastructure in the continent. And how do you see that infrastructure being built from an ecosystem perspective? Obviously, Philip mentioned M-Pesa, which is creating the payment systems for those things to happen. But what are other things that need to happen that are not happening currently? Because the proliferation of digital commerce has not been as as robust as we want it in Africa. So what are the things that we need? I mean, I don't need, you guys don't need to go into details, but what are the kind of the big picture, big prerequisites in your opinion for digital commerce to truly come alive in Africa? And maybe you could start it off by with your comments, at least how you, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a very short answer, but it's e-commerce. I think is great. It's, you know, it's obviously the parties in the e-commerce transaction. So if I'm selling baby clothes and Thomas, you're buying them, then we benefit from the efficiency of that. The e-commerce platform, whether that's Jumia or Amazon or eBay, they benefit from that. But in Africa, it's, you know, we're always thinking of that village. And so it's also the payment gateways. It's also the logistic. It's also the boda driver who's going to ride those baby clothes over to you and sell that and deliver that to you. So all the logistics around that is also beneficial. So for me, it's, we need to build on trust, but that'll only be done if we do it more and more. So e-commerce might not always be happening on these platforms. I think a lot of e-commerce is happening in this gray market of WhatsApp sellers and Facebook groups and so on that we're not really measuring well. And there is a trust issue because we haven't done this before. We're used to walking into shops and touching things and looking someone in the eye and figuring things out. But the more that we do this, the more that we understand digital footprints and digital reputations and how to distill those, then it'll grow. It's bound to grow because it's an efficient way of doing business.
That's awesome, Maria. You talk about trust. I mean, one of the questions that I got when I posted this on LinkedIn, if you have any questions, I had a person who contacted me with a question. It was about trust. I think this person actually bought, an African diaspora person bought something from their home country. And let's just say the commerce did not work the way they expected it. So they have to deal it with their credit company and all that. So that frustration is essentially a lack of trust. Like there's a gap of trust in terms of if I want X, would X be able to deliver for me in a manner that is consistent? So I'm glad you mentioned that, but I had to insert that question because it came to me. So, but you've answered it already, why trust is a critical thing. Rote, what's your thoughts on digital commerce?
But Thomas, I think for that though, look, the market has a very savvy way of correcting itself, right? I mean, your reputation will precede sort of your business model to some extent. So if you are sort of that girl or guy who are trying to cheat sort of your first transactions, know that you can put your business aspirations to rest. So that will correct itself. But look, I think fundamentally we have to look at a couple of things in Africa for e-commerce and sort of digital sort of economy to really take off in the context of trade. One is interoperability. Our financial services, right? I mean, we have huge issues, let alone sort of cross-border, even within country. Driving sort of a coherent interoperability within our financial industry is a huge challenge and an impediment that we have. So first, we have to solve for that. I mean, there's no two ways around it. The second one, I think, which we haven't really tackled on and brought to this conversation is the Continental Free Trade Agreement, right? So CFTA under the mandate of the AU is a huge agenda that all countries are pushing forward. And I think coupled with COVID, I think it really presents an opportunity for Africa to, I hate the word leapfrog for different reasons than what Philip said, but it will allow us to sort of push forward our agenda even further and making sure that we can actually take advantage and drive a proper intercontinental trade that allows us to benefit, but also to increase sort of our net as well across markets. So interoperability, I think CFTA intentionality, resourcing behind it to really make it real.
That's beautiful. I'm glad you brought the CFTA thing because that entire trade agreement is on the basis that there will be harmonization both on regulatory issues, but also interoperability. So that has a huge promise, and I hope that promise will be fulfilled in that manner. But thank you for bringing that up. Joseph, any comments both on from your current perspective and also, I mean, obviously you've been deep. You had a huge experience and distinguished career at Intel. And what's your thoughts on the promise of digital commerce for Africa?
Thanks, Thomas. I think that, I would just echo what my colleagues have said. I actually don't see a lot of differences between the other space or the other areas that we talked about earlier. So for instance, the issue of access. If you want to really establish the economy that works, or e-commerce that works, you need access. People have to have access. And so increasing that or broaden this access to connectivity is going to be like a base for anything technology related. And that includes e-commerce. The other part is around the platform themselves, right? So once you have access, then you need a platform in order to transact. And that platform, I think, would cover the trust issues. Because if you have a platform that actually is solid, that embeds in security, embeds in quality and what have you, then it really kind of reduces this, this quote unquote trust that I have to have with you. I mean, I need to transact with you. If I go to McDonald's to buy a burger, I don't have to trust the burger. I mean, it's like a trust between the owner of that McDonald's and me. It's just, I know I'm going to get the burger that they say they have, right? It's that kind of, yes, it's trust, but it's not a person to person. It's more of, I trust that platform, I trust that institution because it's going to deliver what it says it's going to deliver. So I think that the work in this platform is going to be another key. And the other third pillar is really around policies, right? Policy that regulate the e-commerce, policy that regulate the digital aspect of the economy. We need to be able to have these in place, and they have to be solid. I think this is an area that we have not done a lot of work on the continent that needs to be done. And I'll end with one comment because Amrota brought up this CFTA and this is the Africa Diaspora network. And I just one thing that always intrigues me in a way is that every time we get together, we talk about Africa as an entity, right? But the reality on the ground is so different because it's Rwanda, it's Kenya, it's Uganda, it's Tanzania, it's all these countries. It's now one thing about Africa. And my hope is that with the CFTA is that we can start to get to broaden this one country at a time type of approach to a broader continental level, because otherwise we're going to always be limited by this fragmentation of the continent. This is why we're not seeing as much, movement on the continent as we see, for example, in China or in India. Those are one country. You have an agreement with the government is China. It's the whole China you're going to operate in, where there is no such thing as an agreement with Africa. If you want to do business, you're going to have to sign an agreement with Rwanda. You're going to sign an agreement with Burundi. You're going to sign an agreement with Kenya. By the time you're done, you're so tired, you don't even know where to begin. So the point of it is that let's really become an Africa from a business and economic perspective. And I think it will see a huge progress taking place.
That's awesome. So the last question I have for you, we're wrapping up, is I'm a foresight freak. So I'm going to ask you, since I've given you, when I started the conversation, I told you my time from 2000, then 2010, the McKinsey report, and now we're in 2020. So if you indulge me, 2030, how do you foresee this conversation going? How do you see, what are the accomplishments or the challenges that we're going to see? So if you indulge me with some level of time travel, each of you, if you could kind of, I'm not asking you to predict, but I want you to share for me your vision, your foresight in terms of where Africa is going, powered by connectivity. I would appreciate that. So Joseph, why don't you start it off? Let me just start off by sharing your foresight for us. What would happen in Africa in 2030?
Well, Thomas, I'm an optimist person when it comes to Africa. As you know, just last year I packed up and left the U.S. and now I'm home. Because
you walked the talk. You walked the talk, indeed.
That's how much I really honestly believe in the opportunity of Africa. I think that we have a singular opportunity that in front of us today is for the first time since colonization, we are becoming masters of our own destinies. Africans are actually taking the lead. And that gives me hope. That really gives me hope. And also these type of agreements, such as the trade agreement, that they're starting to look, there is a realization that we can do better together. And that's also starting to take hold. And I think that's another.
I'm sorry, Matt. Sorry about that.
Oh boy.
Can you meet her? Would you be able to meet her yourself from your side?
Yeah, Megan can do it.
Okay.
Thanks, Megan.
Yep, it's done.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joseph.
All right. So anyway, I was building up on this hope that I have of Africa. I think that one, Africans are taking the lead in their own affairs. Second, I think that we are starting to understand, acknowledge, and take up this challenge of really digitizing our continent. And so couple that with the fact that we actually have a demographic that is beyond the dream of any continent, is that, the average age of was at 17.5, I think that Philip mentioned. It does vary, but the fact of the matter is that by the turn by the time we hit 2100, we would be, every other person on a continent, on the planet would be African. So we have the power of the people behind us. If we enable our people, we have an opportunity to literally take the lead. I don't want to use the word leapfrog, take the lead in one generation, because we'll have the youngest population, we will have a workforce which is unparalleled if we can educate our young people and empower them. So I'm really full of optimism when it comes to the future of Africa.
Phenomenal. Amrote?
Look, I think I have one thing to say, which is, I think so far we've been driving the narrative of Africans for Africans. I would dare say that by 2030, it would actually be Africans for the world, because we will be sort of from a skills perspective, from a youth perspective, at that point where we can actually drive sort of the tipping point in terms of the where and how we should be there. But look, to do that, we need to drive again sort of the fundamentals, skills, connectivity, and then more importantly, sort of the innovation. And so I think with that, we will definitely be in a place where we can compete, but more importantly, sort of shift the sort of geopolitical dynamics around Africa so that we're actually owners of our own future as well.
Great. Nivi?
Well, I think we're all realizing now, and hopefully we'll get there in the next 10 years, that there's no silver bullet. We've pressed reset, and we're going to move away from this one-size-fits-all thinking, especially when it comes to education. Sir Ken Robinson spoke a lot about why it's a bad idea, and may he rest in peace. But what is the solution? So I hope that we'll find that every parent, every family, every child will find a good way of learning and growing and unlocking this, what I'm calling the largest, greatest network of knowledge and information in the world. And sorry, Philip, but we are going to leapfrog. Look around you. If you're in the USA, look around you and look at the worst ways in which people are using the internet. Look at the teenagers who are feeling bad about their bodies and their lives because of what they see on Instagram. Look at the people who are glued to their phones and don't know how to have conversations. And we're going to leapfrog that. And we're going to be able to unlock digital access for the majority of people in Africa and do it in a conscientious and meaningful way. People are going to connect with each other, use technology just as a tool for that. They're going to connect, do bigger things, better things, to do, as Amrote said, fix problems for the world. But we have to recognize that if we want this innovation to happen, that we have to fund the small players in this industry. We have to fund what Philip is calling these fourth revolution companies, these startups that are trying to figure it out, that are on the ground, that have their hands dirty, that know what to do and where to go and how to work with the local problems, and are really fixing things around them.
Lovely, beautiful. So this is my last comment, and I'm going to pass it to Almaz, is that my foresight is that in 2030 that the conversation about connectivity will be in past tense, not in the future. in a way that we've solved at least the connectivity problem because of the works like BRIC and Microsoft and Mastercard and everybody else who's involved in that ecosystem building. Hopefully we'll be able to solve that. I also have a plugin for those folks who are listening in. Our office and the USAID has a joint program, a public-private partnership pilot fund for COVID-19. It's about, both on economic resiliency and recovery. And so if you have ideas, but we're accepting concept notes. And again, it's a joint Department of State and USAID program. And my colleagues will be dropping those links on the chat. Please send us our way. I want to obviously thank Nivi, Amrote, Joseph, Philip, and Elaine, and everybody who's been involved in this conversation. This has been an honor for us to be involved in this conversation. What I can tell you, all the visions that all the colleagues talked about of Africa's emergence, Africa for Africans, you can count on America's friendship and support. We've already been doing that. Like I said, the U.S. has been a huge supporter of Africa's emergence, both on the technology side and other ways, and I think that will continue to flourish, and you can count on our support on that one. I'll also be remiss not to mention, I see on the chat box, great friends Mark Kaplan, who we worked with together on MFISH, who is a connectivity expert who's working on kind of value chain and supply chain issues related to blockchain. So I want to give him props. He's been talking about that. Russell Martin, who is the original Diaspora person who I had the pleasure of working. If you want to learn about Diaspora engagement, talk to the Irish. They're amazing. Talk to him. The other one is my good friend and brother, Rockefeller Harris from USAID. He's a shout out to him for all the work that he's been doing in the continent. And Muse Haile, who is the blockchain expert, who's been talking about how you can build trust on digital commerce, is there. And I want to thank them for their participation. And most importantly, I want to thank Almaz and her entire team for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation with you. I hope you found this conversation helpful and adds value to you. And the Department of State is open for any conversations. So please contact me if you have any questions or ideas in terms of how the U.S. can support Africa's emergence. Please send it my way. And on that note, I'm going to pass the mic to Almaz. Please take it away.
Thank you, Thomas. So I am going to have you stay, all of you, before I say thank you. And you want me to say thank you because there are so many things I want to share. Please help us fill out this poll. It is not going to take you 2 minutes. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to say this. I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of our journey. We started 10 years ago with a very simple vision, and that we can bring Africans and friends of Africa together to form a relationship, to learn from each other, to really collaborate, build trust, and do some incredible work to make the continent and the community where we live a much better place. I keep saying to myself that every session we had the last 3 webinars, I keep saying, oh, this was a great session. This is fantastic. And Megan is here. The other 2 of my team members are out. We keep saying that, but I have to say today was an incredible thing because I've learned so many things. And Philip and Ilian and Thomas and Nivi and Joseph, thank you so much for what you do. I am learning about, we had this leapfrogging or disrupting discussions, and I think we should continue to have these discussions because no one really knows what is needed, but collectively we have something that we bring to our community that we can really make a difference. So I am very grateful to each and every one of you. I will end the poll. I want to really give this shout out to my team, Megan, Deborah, Caroline, Yinka, and Dan. They do amazing work. We work very hard. Those of us those of you who know us, we work hard. We never stop working hard. We believe in working hard and producing something. I also want to tell you something that we will be announcing in January. We just got funding for our Builders of Africa's Future. Every year we bring 10 entrepreneurs from Africa, but I'm so proud to say it took us, of course, 4 Builders of Africa's to get to where we are, but we got a commitment to fund 10 of the builders of Africa's future that we will be announcing at the January convening. They will each get $5,000. And this is the reason why we do what we do. We used to bring them here to make connections, find potential investors, but now that they are not going to be able to come in person, they will do their presentation virtually, but we really worked very hard to get that money, and we will announce the funder and all of that in the coming months and weeks to come. We have an event on October 28th on innovation hubs in Africa. We're very delighted to have the Minister of ICT of Rwanda, Joseph, if you're there, and Ilian, thank you, Rwanda. And then we have others, and CD Glean from USADF will be moderating this session, and we will announce the speakers, but the registration is open. Please register. I also wanted to really tell you that if you haven't done, if you don't really fill out the survey that we share with you, which takes 7 minutes, you will have to believe that I will come after you over and over and over for 2 weeks. So the best thing to do is just fill it out. Whether we're doing good or bad, it doesn't matter. What we're looking from you is to tell us what do we need to do to better our work and to serve you better, to serve the community better. We are 10 years old. We cannot be the same over and over, and we need to change some things, and we can only do this if we hear from you. Finally, Thomas, how great that you have really moderated this session, and so Elian and Philip, and I will reach out to all of you because this should be a continuing discussion. We don't know what the change will be, but ADN, the board, has decided we're going to focus on 4 areas for the next 3 years. So this is part of our strategic direction: connectivity, finance, education, and healthcare. So we will come back to you because we really love this discussion today. I don't know about